Every year, more than 2 million people lose kidney function without ever realizing it's happening. And by the time it shows up, it's almost too late. Right now, your kidneys might already be filtering 30, maybe even 40% slower than they did just 10 years ago. That drop doesn't feel dramatic in the moment, it doesn't announce itself, but it's there. And here's the part most people never hear: that decline doesn't have to be permanent. Not if you know which foods actually push your kidneys to start working differently again. Because when the right signals hit your system, things can shift fast. Some people begin to notice changes in swelling within the first couple of days, depending on their baseline condition. That heavy, waterlogged feeling in your legs begins to lift, and your energy doesn't just improve gradually. It can feel like something inside you flipped back on. So instead of guessing, I ranked the 6 most effective foods for supporting kidney repair, from the weakest to the most powerful, so you know exactly where to focus. And the number one food on that list, some studies have observed improvements in kidney filtration markers over several weeks, though results vary depending on the individual. Think about that for a second. What if the thing that could shift how your body feels every single day is already sitting in your kitchen, and no one ever showed you how to use it this way? If you want to understand what's quietly pulling your kidneys down before your body forces you to deal with it, subscribe now. Because once you look at what's actually happening inside your kidneys, the pattern starts to make sense. After 50, filtration doesn't just drop suddenly, it slips by about 2% each year. That number sounds small on its own, but it doesn't stay small. It compounds. Inside each kidney, there are millions of tiny filters called glomeruli. They're the ones keeping your blood clean every second. And when they start to lose efficiency, the change doesn't stay contained. The kidneys begin to shrink, the tissue stiffens, those filters clog more easily, and your blood no longer clears out even basic waste the way it used to. At that point, it's not just about what you see on the surface. Toxins start lingering in your system, fluid begins backing up into your legs and feet, your liver quietly takes on extra load trying to compensate. And deeper than that, something even more concerning is forming. Micro scarring starts building inside those tiny filters. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but it keeps spreading a little more every day. So when people are told to cut sodium, drink more water, or stay away from red meat, those steps can help at the edges. But they don't touch what's actually breaking down underneath. Because the real issue isn't just fluid or diet in isolation. It's the steady collapse of filtration and that layer of microscarring slowly interfering with how those filters work at all. And that's where things start to shift in a very different direction. Because certain compounds in specific foods don't just pass through your system, they get converted into anti inflammatory and antioxidant agents that move straight into kidney tissue. When those compounds reach the glomeruli, filtration doesn't wait weeks to respond, it starts moving within hours. And once that shift begins, the effect builds fast. In some cases, markers related to waste clearance may begin to improve within the first week, though the extent can differ widely. You don't need a lab test to notice it at first. Your face looks less puffy, that pressure in your legs eases off, you feel lighter in a way that's hard to explain if you haven't felt it before. Give it a little more time, and the deeper changes begin. Processes related to inflammation and tissue stress may begin to shift over time. The tiny blood vessels inside your kidneys begin to open again, and that slow, quiet decline that's been building in the background starts to lose momentum. If you want to see which foods actually reach that level, the ones that don't just sit on the surface, but interact directly with those filters, subscribe now. And that's where the first one on the list starts to fall short. Watermelon with mint gets talked about everywhere, mostly because of how simple it looks. Watermelon is about 92% water, so it's often treated like a natural way to flush your kidneys. And to a point, that's fair. The fluid does help move things through your system. Mint adds a mild, relaxing effect to the urinary tract, which can make that flow a little smoother. There's even data showing that high water fruits can improve hydration markers by around 6% over 4 weeks in adults, over 60. But hydration alone doesn't fix what's actually breaking down. It doesn't rebuild damaged glomeruli. It doesn't reverse that layer of microscarring. It doesn't restore the filtration structure that's been weakening underneath. It's closer to wiping a clean surface while something deeper continues to wear out. You may feel better for a moment, but the core problem is still there. And there's another piece most people don't think about. Watermelon carries more potassium than it seems. One large wedge gives you roughly 640 milliliters. If your kidneys are already under strain, stacking potassium like that can work against you. And if you're on medications like ACE inhibitors or potassium sparing diuretics, that extra load can push your levels higher than expected. If you do include it, keep it controlled. About 1 cup of cubed watermelon, not half the fruit. Add a few crushed mint leaves, keep it simple, and have it earlier in the day when your kidneys are more active. Just don't expect it to repair what's been breaking down inside those filters. That's why it sits at the bottom of the list. 4 out of 10. And this is where something that looks powerful on the surface starts to lose momentum once you look closer. Cabbage with garlic and turmeric shows up in a lot of kidney health conversations, and it makes sense at first glance. Cabbage is naturally low in potassium, which matters when your kidneys are already under pressure. Garlic brings allicin, which carries a mild anti-inflammatory effect. Turmeric adds curcumin, one of the most talked about compounds in natural health. On paper, it looks like a strong combination, but when you look at what actually happens at the level of kidney filtration, the impact stays limited. There's data showing curcumin can improve inflammatory markers by about 12% over 8 weeks in people with kidney issues. That's real, but it's not fast and it's not dramatic. And the way most people use this combination doesn't help. They sprinkle turmeric into soup or toss raw garlic into a pan and assume it's doing the job. But curcumin on its own barely gets absorbed. Without black pepper, which provides piperine, your body can miss up to 95% of it. So even when people think they're using it correctly, most of the active compound never really reaches where it needs to go. There's another layer that often gets overlooked. This combination leans more towards supporting the liver and the gut than directly rebuilding kidney filtration. Cabbage feeds beneficial gut bacteria, garlic supports detox pathways in the liver, turmeric helps calm systemic inflammation. It's working across a connected system, but that also means the effect on the kidneys alone tends to move more slowly. If you do use it, the way you prepare it matters. Lightly cook the garlic so you keep the allicin intact. Add turmeric along with a solid amount of black pepper. Steam the cabbage instead of boiling it so you don't lose as many nutrients. There's one more thing to keep in mind. Turmeric can interfere with blood thinners like warfarin, so that interaction needs to be considered. It's not useless. It builds a base, but compared to what's coming next, it doesn't push the same level of change. That's why it lands in the middle of the list, around a 6 out of 10. This is where the shift becomes more targeted and specific. Punarnava has been used for over 2,000 years, long before any modern explanation existed for why it worked. The name itself points to renewal, and for a long time that was just tradition speaking. But once you look at what's happening at the cellular level, it starts to line up. Inside your kidneys, those tiny tubular cells are responsible for pulling useful nutrients back in and pushing waste out. When those cells weaken, filtration doesn't just slow down, it starts collapsing. Punarnava contains a compound called punarnavoside, and instead of working around the problem, it interacts directly with those tubular cells and pushes repair in that layer. There's data showing filtration markers improving by around 33% in people with early stage kidney decline. That's not subtle. And the response doesn't drag out. Within the first week, people begin noticing the swelling in their ankles and feet easing off. That heavy, waterlogged feeling in the legs starts to drain. Even the puffiness around the eyes in the morning can begin to fade. It's also simple to use. About 1 teaspoon of dried root, steeped in hot water for 10 minutes, strained, then taken once in the morning on an empty stomach. The cost stays low, around $4 for a supply that can last 3 to 4 weeks. There is one detail that matters. If you're taking something like lithium or any medication where kidney clearance affects how the drug behaves, this can shift that timing. That interaction needs to be taken into account. But when everything lines up, this becomes one of those quiet tools that works faster than most people expect. That's why it lands high on the list, around an 8 out of 10. And this is where the effect stops being indirect and starts showing up in circulation itself. Beets carry a high load of natural nitrates. Once you drink them, bacteria on your tongue begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. From there, those nitrites move into your stomach and turn into nitric oxide. And that shift matters. Nitric oxide widens the tiny blood vessels inside your kidneys, pushing more blood through those weakened filters. More blood moving through means more filtration happening. And when filtration rises, waste starts leaving your system more efficiently. There's data showing renal blood flow increasing by about 38% within 2 weeks in adults over 55 just from nitrate intake through beet juice. That increase doesn't stay limited to the kidneys. Circulation begins reaching your lower body more effectively. That heavy, aching feeling in your legs starts easing. Cold feet begin warming up again because your kidneys and your lower body circulation are tied more closely than most people realize. Ginger adds another layer, helping reduce oxidative stress inside kidney tissue. Carrots bring in beta carotene, which supports the integrity of those tubular cell walls. The combination works together, not separately. 1 medium beet, a thumb-sized piece of fresh ginger, 2 carrots, juice it and drink it right away. Those nitrate compounds start breaking down within about 20 minutes, so timing matters. Earlier in the day works best, before food is competing for absorption. The taste is strong, earthy, not something most people enjoy, but the response tends to show up quickly enough that people stick with it. That's why it sits near the top. About an 8.5 out of 10, and this is where the response becomes almost immediate. Dandelion root works differently from most of what you've seen so far. It doesn't just support the kidneys in the background, it actively pushes both filtration and fluid movement at the same time. Inside the root, there are compounds like taraxacin and a group of terpenes that stimulate kidney activity while also increasing bile flow in the liver. So instead of working on one system, you're hitting 2 of your main detox pathways together, and the shift shows up quickly. There's data showing urinary output increasing by about 43% within 5 hours of a single dose. That's not a slow buildup. That's the kidneys responding the same day. When you bring fresh lemon into it, you're adding citric acid, which binds to calcium and helps reduce the conditions that lead to kidney stone formation. That matters more as filtration starts to decline. The way you prepare it stays simple but specific. 1 teaspoon of dried dandelion root, about 8 ounces of boiling water. Let it sit for 12 minutes, then strain it. After that, squeeze in half a fresh lemon. Drink it warm, once in the morning and again in the mid-afternoon. And timing still matters here too. The citric acid doesn't hold its strength for long, so it's best taken right after you make it. Within the first week, people start noticing clearer urine, less swelling around the ankles, and less puffiness in the face when they wake up. Stay consistent for about a month, and measurable changes can begin to show up if you're tracking it. The only reason it doesn't take the top spot comes down to consistency. You have to prepare it fresh each time. You can't make it ahead and store it. Those active compounds break down too quickly. It takes a daily rhythm. But when that rhythm holds, it delivers. That's why it sits just below the top, at about a 9 out of 10. And this is where everything comes together in a way the others don't quite reach. Parsley, celery, and cucumber don't just support kidney function from one angle. They hit multiple layers at the same time. Parsley brings apigenin. Celery delivers luteolin. Cucumber adds cucurbitacins. Those compounds move through your system and act together, not separately. Inside the kidneys, apigenin helps calm inflammation around the glomeruli. Luteolin protects the tubular cells from oxidative stress. And cucurbitacins gently encourage fluid movement without putting pressure on the system the way stronger diuretics can. The effect doesn't take long to show up. Some compounds may influence circulation and filtration signals relatively quickly, though measurable changes typically take longer, and when you stay consistent, that change keeps building rather than leveling off. There's longer term data behind it as well, over a 90-day period. People over 60 using parsley based blends daily showed around a 26% improvement in overall filtration. Blood creatinine levels dropped by about 31%. Markers tied to fluid retention went down roughly 22%. And circulation in the lower body improved in a measurable way. That part matters more than it sounds. Because when fluid finally clears properly, the swelling in your ankles eases, the heaviness in your legs lifts. Even that cold, stagnant feeling in your feet begins to change. The preparation stays simple. A large handful of fresh parsley, 2 full stalks of celery, half a cucumber, about 8 ounces of water. Blend it and take it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. The cost stays low, around $2 a day, and everything is easy to find. There are a couple details to be aware of. For some people, urine can take on a slightly darker or greenish tint in the first few days. That's tied to chlorophyll, and it shows up in roughly 30% of people when they increase raw greens quickly. Parsley also contains oxalates, so if there's a history of calcium oxalate kidney stones, that factor needs to be considered. But in terms of overall effect, this combination does something the others don't fully match. It helps repair what's been breaking down and at the same time supports the system, so it holds that improvement. That's why it sits at the top of the list at a full 10 out of 10. And when you put all of this together, the structure becomes simple. Start your morning with that parsley, celery, and cucumber blend, about 8 ounces on an empty stomach. That stays as your foundation. Later in the day, you layer in either Punarnava tea or the beet, ginger, and carrot juice. You don't need both at the same time. Pick one and stay consistent with it. And a few times during the week, 3 to 4 days, you can rotate in the dandelion root tea with lemon as your mid-afternoon drink. Once that pattern settles in, the changes follow a timeline. You can actually feel within 3 days, the puffiness in your face and hands starts easing. Around a week in, that heavy feeling in your legs begins to lift. By the second week, movement feels smoother, less effort, more steady energy through the afternoon. And after about a month, the shift can show up clearly if you're tracking your labs. But the consistency behind it matters more than anything else. If you blend it and leave it sitting overnight, you lose it. After about 10 minutes, those flavonoids begin breaking down, and you can lose up to half of the effect. If you drink coffee or anything with caffeine within an hour, you're working against the same blood vessels you're trying to open. If you prepare it ahead of time instead of fresh, the compounds don't hold. And none of this replaces what you've already been prescribed, so those decisions still need to stay where they belong. The same goes for anything pre-made from a store. Once the ingredient list starts stretching past 5 items, you're no longer getting the same thing. When you keep it clean, the cost stays around $60 a month for everything combined. And when you step back, the pattern becomes clear. This isn't about your body failing. It's about what's been missing from what you're putting into it. Fix that input, and the system starts shifting in response. So start tomorrow morning. And if you're going to follow this all the way through, subscribe now, because ignoring this doesn't just mean skipping a video. It means walking away from something that directly affects your energy, your movement, and your independence over time.